When you think of medieval Europe, what comes to mind? Maybe grand castles, powerful kings, towering cathedrals, and charming old cities. It's an era we often associate with strong faith, beautiful art, and rich traditions. But hidden behind this romantic image is one of the darkest chapters in history: the Spanish Inquisition. This wasn't just a historical event. It was a period where fear became a part of daily life. Imagine living in a world where a single whispered accusation could shatter your entire family. A world where your neighbor, your friend, or even a complete stranger could point a finger and seal your fate. This was the reality for countless people who were arrested, interrogated, and punished, all in the name of religious purity. And among the most vulnerable, the ones who suffered immensely, were women. The Spanish Inquisition officially began in 1478, established by the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella. Its main goal was to maintain Catholic orthodoxy in their kingdoms. But what started as a mission to unify a nation under one faith quickly spiraled into a brutal campaign of persecution. The primary targets were originally conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity but were suspected of secretly practicing their old faith. But soon, the net widened, ensnaring anyone who deviated from the strict doctrines of the Church. So, why were women particularly at risk? Well, in a society dominated by men, women held very little power. They were often seen as morally weaker and more susceptible to temptation and evil influences. This deeply ingrained misogyny made them easy targets. Many of the accusations against women were related to witchcraft, healers who used traditional herbal remedies, midwives who assisted in childbirth, or simply elderly women who lived alone could find themselves accused of making pacts with the devil. Their knowledge, once respected, was twisted into evidence of dark magic. The process was terrifying. Once accused, a person was considered guilty until proven innocent, which was nearly impossible. The accused would be arrested, often in the dead of night, and their property would be confiscated. They were held in secret prisons, completely isolated from their families and the outside world. They wouldn't even be told who had accused them or what specific charges they faced. The interrogations were designed to break the human spirit. Psychological manipulation was common, but the Inquisition is most infamous for its use of physical torture. Methods like the strapedo, where victims were hoisted to the ceiling by their wrists, or the water cure, which simulated drowning, were used to extract confessions. Under such extreme duress, it's no surprise that many innocent people confessed to crimes they never committed, often implicating others to stop the pain. For women, the humiliation was compounded. The interrogations and examinations were conducted by men, stripping them of their dignity in the most intimate ways. A woman's word held little value against a man's, and their attempts to defend themselves were often dismissed as lies or hysteria. If a confession was secured, the next step was the auto da fe, or act of faith. This was a public ceremony where the sentences were read out. It was a spectacle designed to intimidate the public and reinforce the Church's power. Punishments ranged from public shaming and fines to imprisonment, or, in the most extreme cases, being relaxed to the secular arm, which was a euphemism for being burned at the stake. Thousands of people, many of them women, met this horrifying end. The Spanish Inquisition lasted for over 350 years, casting a long, dark shadow over history. It serves as a chilling reminder of what can happen when religious fanaticism is combined with unchecked power. It shows us how fear can be weaponized to control entire populations, and how prejudice can lead to unimaginable cruelty. The stories of the women who suffered during this time are a vital part of our collective memory, a warning against it. Have you ever heard of a court where you're guilty until proven innocent, where your accusers are anonymous, and the evidence against you is a secret? This wasn't a scene from a dystopian movie. It was the reality of the Spanish Inquisition. Let's travel back in time to late 15th century Spain, a land fresh from the Reconquista, where Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella had just unified the country. But their vision of a unified Spain wasn't just about territory. It was about faith. They wanted a purely Catholic kingdom, and that's where our story begins. In 1478, the Spanish Inquisition was established. Its official purpose: to maintain Catholic orthodoxy and root out heresy. But what did that actually mean? It primarily targeted conversos Jews who had converted to Christianity, often under duress. The Crown and the Church were suspicious. Were these conversions genuine, Or were these people practicing their old faith in secret? This suspicion created a climate of fear that would hang over Spain for more than 350 years. Imagine this. A neighbor who holds a grudge against you could anonymously report you to the Inquisition. Suddenly, in the dead of night, you're arrested. You're taken to a secret prison, and you have no idea what you're accused of or who accused you. The inquisitorial process was designed to secure a confession. The accused were not allowed legal counsel. They couldn't confront their accusers, and any testimony in their favor was often dismissed. The entire system was stacked against them from the very beginning. The inquisitors were master interrogators. They would use psychological tactics, isolation, and the constant threat of what might happen to break a person's spirit. If that didn't work, they resorted to torture. It's important to understand that torture wasn't used randomly. It was a formal, documented part of the process, meant to extract a confession of heresy. The methods were brutal, designed to inflict maximum pain without necessarily leaving visible marks or killing the victim, so the interrogation could continue. The mere threat of these instruments was often enough to make someone confess to crimes they never committed. If a confession was obtained, the accused person's fate was decided at a large public ceremony called an Untold, which means act of faith. This was a grand spectacle, designed to be a public lesson. Sentences were read out loud. Punishments ranged from public humiliation, fines, and confiscation of all property which conveniently enriched the crown and the Inquisition itself to imprisonment. For those who refused to confess or who were deemed unrepentant heretics, the ultimate penalty was death. They were relaxed to the secular arm, a chilling euphemism for being handed over to the state authorities to be burned at the stake. But the Inquisition wasn't just about religious purity. It was a powerful tool of social and political control. It enforced conformity, crushed dissent, and created a society where everyone was watching everyone else. Your lineage, your daily habits, even what you ate, could be used as evidence against you. The fear it generated was its greatest weapon, ensuring obedience, not just to the church, but to the state. It stifled intellectual curiosity and scientific inquiry for centuries, as new ideas could easily be branded as heretical. The legacy of the Spanish Inquisition is complex and dark. It represents a time when religious fervor was used to justify unimaginable cruelty and state control. It serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of intolerance and the importance of justice systems where the accused have rights. Looking back at this history isn't just about understanding the past. It's about valuing the principles of a fair trial, freedom of belief, and the rule of law that we fight for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this dive into history, have you ever wondered why, in so many historical stories, it's women who are accused of witchcraft? It's a dark and fascinating question, and the answer tells us a lot about the past. Let's travel back in time to understand why women were so often the targets. Imagine a world very different from ours. For centuries, society was structured in a way that left women in a very vulnerable position. Legally, they had far fewer protections than men. Their access to education was severely limited, and their rights were often tied to their fathers or husbands. If a woman was widowed, unmarried, or simply lived on her own, she was already on the fringes of society. Many of these women took on roles that were essential but also viewed with suspicion. They were the village healers, using ancient knowledge of herbs and remedies to care for the sick. They were midwives, present at the mysterious and dangerous moments of birth. They worked as servants in other people's homes, privy to family secrets and dynamics. While Vaida, these roles placed them in a unique position. When something went wrong, if a child fell ill, a cow stopped giving milk, or a sudden storm ruined the crops, it was easy to point a finger at the woman who lived just outside the norms of the community. Think about the social dynamics of a small village. Everyone knows everyone else's business. Now, picture a woman who was a little different. Maybe she was poor and had to rely on the charity of others, which could breed resentment. Perhaps she was outspoken, refusing to be silent in a world that expected women to be quiet and submissive. Or maybe she was just an outsider, with different customs or beliefs. These differences made people uncomfortable and suspicious. Personal conflicts often fueled the fire. A simple neighborhood squabble, a bout of jealousy over a good harvest, or lingering anger from a past argument could escalate dramatically. An accusation of witchcraft became a powerful weapon. It was a way to settle scores, to explain away misfortunes, and to remove someone who was considered a troublemaker or simply disliked. And here's the most terrifying part. Once an accusation was made, it was almost impossible to escape. The legal systems were heavily biased. Trials often relied on flimsy evidence, forced confessions, and spectral testimony where accusers claimed the witch's spirit had visited them. There was no innocent until proven guilty. An accusation was practically a conviction. A woman's good reputation, her entire life's work, could be destroyed by a single whispered word. She was trapped in a system designed to find her guilty. The witch trials weren't just random acts of madness. They were a symptom of a society where fear, superstition, and social inequality created a perfect storm. Women, particularly those who were marginalized, bore the brunt of this hysteria. They were scapegoats for a world struggling with things it couldn't understand or control. This history is a sobering reminder of what can happen when fear and prejudice are allowed to run rampant, and when the most vulnerable members of society are left without protection. It highlights the long and difficult journey women have undertaken to gain the rights and respect they have today. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into a dark chapter of history. Have you ever wondered how easily a community can turn on itself? Imagine living in a time when a single whispered word could shatter your entire world. It wasn't just about a specific event or a distant threat. The danger was right next door. It was in the air you breathed, in the sidelong glances of your neighbors, the forced smiles of your so-called friends. This was a reality for many throughout history. Accusations didn't need proof. They only needed an audience, a rival who coveted your land, a neighbor who held a grudge. Even a family member looking to settle an old score, any of them could point a finger. And once that finger was pointed, it was almost impossible to unpoint it. Rumors would ignite like dry tinder, spreading through the town square, the market, the church pews. Suddenly, your quiet habits were seen as suspicious secrets. Your success was evidence of some dark pact. In this climate of fear, paranoia became the currency of survival. People started reporting the smallest, most insignificant. Gather herbs from the forest. Maybe you were making potions. Did you keep to yourself? You must be hiding something. Did you speak your mind freely? You were clearly a troublemaker. The pressure to conform was immense. It was a terrifying game where the rules were constantly changing, and the only way to win was not to be noticed at all. This led to a culture of silence. Honesty was a luxury no one could afford. Voicing a different opinion, defending an accused friend, or even just questioning the madness could put you next on the list. People learned to wear masks, hiding their true thoughts and feelings behind a facade of agreement. The community, once a source of strength and support, became a web of suspicion. Think about the psychological toll. Every interaction was fraught with tension. Could you trust the person you were talking to? Were they a genuine friend, or were they gathering information to use against you later? This constant state of anxiety eroded the very fabric of society. People became isolated, not just physically, but emotionally. The fear of betrayal was so strong that it severed the bonds of trust that hold a community together. And why did people participate? Sometimes it was out of genuine, misguided belief. They truly thought they were purging evil from their midst. But more often than not, it was about self. By accusing someone else, you could deflect suspicion from yourself. You could prove your loyalty to the dominant group. You could even gain favor, property, or status. It was a twisted incentive structure where the most ruthless and cunning thrived, while the honest and principled were trampled. This isn't just a relic of a bygone era. The mechanics of groupthink, fear, and scapegoating are timeless. It's a stark reminder of how fragile civilization can be, and how quickly fear can unravel it. It shows us that the line between order and chaos, between neighbor and accuser, is terrifyingly thin. It all begins when we stop talking to each other. Imagine this. One morning, you're at home, going about your day, and suddenly there's a knock on the door. It's not a friendly neighbor. It's the authorities, and they're here for you. They have an accusation, a piece of paper that says you've done something terrible. You try to argue, to explain, but no one listens. Before you know it, you're being taken from your home, maybe not even allowed to say a proper goodbye to your family. The door closes behind you, and you realize you might never see them, or your home, ever again. This wasn't just a nightmare. For many women throughout history, it was a terrifying reality. The moment an accusation was made, their lives were turned upside down. Forget innocent until proven guilty. For them, the accusation itself was the verdict. They were immediately branded as guilty in the eyes of society. Let's break down just how devastating this was. First, there was the separation. A woman could be torn from her family without a moment's notice. Her children, her partner, her parents left behind, often just as confused and terrified as she was. The emotional toll of that sudden, violent separation is almost impossible to comprehend. The hope of ever being reunited was slim, a flickering candle in a storm of uncertainty. Then, there was the material loss. It wasn't just her freedom that was stolen. Her property, her home, everything she had worked for or inherited could be seized. This wasn't just about losing possessions. It was about erasing her existence, her place in the world. The home she built, the land her family worked it, could all be gone in an instant, often divided up among her accusers or the local authorities. She was left with nothing but the clothes on her back. And what about her reputation? In a society where a woman's value was so closely tied to her good name, an accusation was a social death sentence. Her name would be dragged through the mud. Neighbors who once smiled and greeted her would now whisper behind her back or cross the street to avoid her. Friends would disappear, either out of fear of being associated with her or because they genuinely believed the accusations. She became a pariah, an outcast, even if, by some miracle, she was later proven innocent. The stain on her reputation would likely never wash away. From the very second she was taken, the loneliness and fear were all. Imagine being thrown into a cold, dark cell. You're completely alone, cut off from everyone you love. The only human contact you might have is with your guards or interrogators, people who already see you as a monster. The fear is constant fear of what will happen next. Fear of the trial, fear of the punishment. Every creak of the door, every footstep in the hall would send a jolt of terror through you. This wasn't a system designed for justice. It was a system designed for conviction. The entire process was skewed against the accused from the start. They were often denied legal counsel, not allowed to know who their accusers were, and subjected to brutal interrogation methods designed to break their spirit and force a confession. Any sign of defiance, any attempt to maintain one's innocence, was often twisted and used as further proof of guilt. A woman who remained calm was called cold and unfeeling. A woman who broke down in tears was seen as admitting her guilt. There was no way to win. This grim chapter of history serves as a powerful reminder of how fragile justice can be, and why the principle of innocent until proven guilty is one of the most important pillars of a fair society. It's a protection we must never take for granted. The stories of these women, though often lost to time, echo a warning about the dangers of mass hysteria, prejudice, and systems of power. Imagine stepping back in time, not into a palace or a grand ballroom, but into the cold, damp shadows of a 19th century prison. For many women, this was a reality far grimmer than we can comprehend today. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and despair. Sunlight was a luxury, a fleeting visitor through a high, barred window if one existed at all. The cells were not just rooms. They were cages, often overcrowded, forcing strangers into a suffocating intimacy. Yet, paradoxically, the most profound punishment was often the exact opposite: complete and utter isolation. Picture this. A woman, perhaps imprisoned for a minor crime like theft, maybe just a victim of circumstance, locked away in a solitary cell. 4 days, weeks, even months. The only sound she might hear is the distant clang of a metal door or the shuffling feet of a guard. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was a roaring void that consumed thoughts and eroded sanity. This wasn't just about being alone. It was about being erased, cut off from the human connection that we all need to survive. There were no friendly faces, no words of comfort, no one to share a story with or offer a reassuring touch. The world outside her, four walls, simply ceased to exist. This profound isolation was a form of psychological torture. The mind, starved of stimulation and social interaction, begins to turn inward. Memories would blur, the sense of time would distort, and a creeping paranoia could take root. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner, could become a source of terror. Without the mirror of another person's reactions, a woman could start to doubt her own reality, her own identity. Hope, a fragile flame in the best of times, would flicker and die in this relentless darkness. It's a terrifying thought, to be physically alive, but mentally and emotionally buried. And the physical conditions only made things worse. The food was often meager and barely edible: thin gruel, stale bread, and tainted water. It was just enough to keep the body alive, but not enough to provide strength or comfort. Hygiene was practically non-existent. Without access to clean water, soap, or fresh clothes, disease was rampant. Lice, skin infections, and respiratory illnesses spread like wildfire in the crowded sections, while those in isolation suffered in their own filth. This constant physical misery ground on a person's resilience, making the psychological burden of their confinement even heavier to bear. The body and mind were under a coordinated assault. Think about the sheer hopelessness of that situation. There was no rehabilitation, no effort to prepare these women for a life after prison. The system wasn't designed to reform. It was designed to punish and to break. For many, the sentence was not just a period of lost time. It was a life-altering trauma from which they might never recover. They entered as individuals and were systematically dismantled, their spirits slowly crushed by the weight of solitude, neglect, and despair. It is a stark reminder of how far we've come in our understanding of justice and human rights, but also a sobering look at the dark chapters of our history. The stories of these forgotten women serve as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but also as a crucial warning about the devastating consequences of cruelty and indifference. Thanks for watching, and if you found this exploration of history meaningful, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the past.